So stop me when you catch on. This is a commentary on the upcoming election. Man, guy did not expect to be in this financial circumstance. A little gambling, a little action on the side, business loss here or there, loan to a friend, a little more gambling, and man, that new Mercedes SUV. Didn't think about the $1,500 per month payments. So takes the black SUV, drives it into a super high crime neighborhood. And on the way, he stops and buys a bunch of liquor and groceries, cigarettes and such, puts it in the back of the SUV, pulls up and leaves it running, fob inside, the lights on inside, opens all the doors, walks away. Did you get it? Got it? Good. We'll talk about that and how the J.D. Vance method, how you can use the J.D. Vance method, communication approach to persuade people, and a reminder about a persuasion construct we haven't talked about in a while. Bring this up because I hope you will make an effort to persuade people who aren't yet decided in terms of their vote. Caring and fairness. Remember that? We'll talk about all this with the help of Bulwark Capital Management. That's knowyourriskradio.com and with God Almighty.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is a day the Lord has made, and these are the times to which God has decided we shall live. Of course, the scenario I described is an election system left absolutely wide open for fraud. Every time I look through this, I am just stunned at anyone who will suggest that state, even believe that we have any method of having safe and secure elections. Because we don't have the baseline data, as we've talked about, because the system is left so wide open. There's this out of Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver. Vancouver, Washington is just across the bridge from Portland, Oregon. And Vancouver is somewhat more conservative. There's areas of actual conservatism. There's no conservatism in Portland. I mean, I shouldn't. My brother-in-law lives there. I guess he's conservative. But in speaking in terms of total numbers. So there's this arson investigation underway, because people have been going to these ballot boxes that are unattended, unguarded, just left out in the open, like the SUV, and they're tossing incendiary devices in there. My friend Ari Hoffman's a great talk show host in Seattle. He's at 570 KVI. He says that some of the materials left behind say "Free Gaza." So it's probably Antifa, right? Maybe. Might be people on the right who want to prove how utterly terrible this entire system is and open to fraud. There are fire suppression devices inside these boxes that put out the flames before most of the ballots were burned. And the so-called election officials and police are saying that it's a small number, maybe 4 or 5 ballots overall. Oh, and by the way, now the people who are doing this know that there are fire suppression devices in there. So how about this time use bleach, something like that, to toss in there? Water balloons filled with bleach, something that will just destroy the ballot's readability. Acid, all sorts of things you could use. If only there was a way to not have those boxes left sitting around the city. If only there was a way you could put them, say, inside of a building, like, a county administration building, where you might be able to check people when they come in. You know what? You could even check their ID. You could even, and if they came in, it's interesting. Ballot drop boxes mean that you can get to a polling location. You got there. Make it a national holiday. Call it Vote Day. Make it a national holiday. every 2 years. Want to fund some things? Fund rides. I'll sign up. Fund rides to the polls for people who don't have cars. And you can't get ID because you can't afford the $15. Drop in the ocean in terms of cost. We'll ID you and will cause other taxpayers to pay for it. And we'll drive you to the polls. But you're going to have your ID. And you're going to have to show up. Voting should be hard-ish. I mean, we want people to do it. I'd prefer that people who don't know the issues don't do it because they're likely to be taken in emotionally. But it should take a little effort, don't you think? The easier you make it for people to vote, like just, hey, print out a ballot at home like you can in King County and fill in some dots, the more votes you'll get from people with less and less buy-in, less and less skin in the game, less and less research, operating simply on the words caring and fairness. We'll talk about those today. Because I hope you'll make an effort to persuade people who can still be persuaded. If they're leftists, they're Democrats, they've made their decision, don't bother, you're not going to change their mind. Focus on the people who are still leaning on the fence, and they do exist. A friend of mine who's very conservative the other day said he's really struggling to vote for Trump. He's not going to vote for Harris, but he's thinking of writing in. I'll talk about a communication construct you could use. It's called the caring and fairness construct to use with people like that. So we'll look at some other cases here of election fraud, attempted election fraud. Then we'll get into J.D. Vance and how his communication style can help us persuade people, if you'll add to this the lens of caring and fairness. We'll talk about this, and we'll talk about the war against election integrity and the war against our country. And that war is very, very real. And there's people who fought in real life, actual physical wars, like my friend Tim Cruikshank, who was with the Navy SEALs. He was a medic attached to the SEAL teams through 3 deployments. You probably know by now about Bone Frog Coffee, I'm guessing, since it's one of our longest-term partners, and Tim's a dear friend. He's been on the show multiple times. You may not know about Bone Frog Cellars. So this is the wine imprint from Bone Frog, and Tim did the same thing here that he did with coffee. He found wine experts. How can I make my own wine? I don't want to private label something. I want something that's meaningful and different and yet comforting and good. That's Bone Frog Cellars. There's a Merlot. There's a Cabernet. We had a tasting party at our home. The wine was rock star for people who either like wine, even people who are new to wine, and to wine experts. That means it's really, really good wine. We had the 2015 vintage. You can get 10% off Bone Frog Cellars right now. And yes, of course, the bottles say God Country Team. Yes, of course, 10% of proceeds go to the Navy SEAL Foundation to help the families of fallen Navy SEALs. Go to bonefrogcoffee.com/Todd. What did I say? It's almost like I said that 100 times. Go to bonefrogsellers.com/Todd, bonefrogsellers.com/Todd, and get 10% off all the wine there. bonefrogsellers.com/Todd. Election officials in New York County have reported that they, like other counties, have received a whole flood of probably fraudulent voter registration forms from outside groups.
York County's Office of Elections recently received a large delivery containing thousands of voter registration forms and mail-in ballot applications from a third-party group.
It's not unusual to get large stacks of voter registrations or large stacks of requests for mail-in ballots. It's just this was an overabundance of registrations from one particular organization.
Overabundance.
This comes after Lancaster County officials announced they are investigating approximately 2,500 voter registration forms for potential fraud. The batch of applications, which had false names, incorrect addresses, and other discrepancies, is being traced back to a large-scale canvassing operation.
A large-scale canvassing operation into a system that is a Mercedes-Benz left running with the door open, the fob there. A whole bunch of alcohol, cigarettes, and groceries in back, and ain't nobody looking. Now, thank God they found this. Thank God they're promoting the fact that they found this because it might dissuade other people. But this is the stuff they found. It doesn't take much. More Republicans than Democrats have voted early in Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina. More than 40 million people have cast early ballots. That's good, except in Nevada. The courts there have decided that there's election day, the 5th, and then if ballots show up the 6th, the 7th, or the 8th with no postmark, they count. Solution to this? Announce no numbers in advance. Lock them down. Don't let any state announce numbers until all states announce numbers. They'll have to announce them secretly if they're going to cheat. They'll have to disseminate this secretly if they're going to cheat. Make that a lifetime in prison felony. There's no reason on earth we need to sit and see the count, the count, the count, the count. The media can do that through exit polling. They can do that by asking people as they leave the polls, do you mind telling us for whom you voted? There's methods to do this, but lock the numbers down. Make them guess at the amount of ballots they need to cheat. This is why I do not give in to the early voting phenomena. I understand why people do. I know full well, because I used to work at the RNC in the leadership team, why we want people to vote early when they can, because it reduces our costs. Once we know you voted, we can steer our turnout people to other areas. I get it. I understand the math. I refuse to participate. First of all, because I feel more secure watching my ballot go into the lockbox in Idaho. Having had my ID checked twice, my signature checked twice, people ask me my address, my age, etc. And because I have a firm belief that early voting in this case, as impressive as it is, and God bless people for being this excited to vote for President Trump. Some friends of mine were in Coeur d'Alene the other day, Idaho, and downtown. This is the only place you can really vote early around our area. And there was a line around the block, people waiting to do this early. Enthusiasm, great. Also, Democrats can look and see how many ballots they need. I refuse to do it. So lock the numbers down, no state reports until all states reports. The reports come out all at once. And that way, there's no way for them to know the numbers they need. See, the push is on, and it's going to continue to be on, for people to pretend that there is a seeking of fairness here. There's a video that came out from Project Veritas. Apparently this time, now they're beginning to do work, at least it's getting noticed, absence James O'Keefe, who's at O'Keefe Media Group, and I think doing better than Project Veritas. I always think that was his organization. He was at least the face for it. So I want you to see this because it involves Ilhan Omar. And she gets to call herself a United States Congresswoman, and I guess technically she is that. And details matter. She doesn't act like a U.S. Congresswoman, not in my opinion. It just seems like fraud across the board. There's a lot of fraud in the nutritional supplement business. There really is. For instance, it's real easy to get your own brand of whey protein. You just slap a label on it. It's really easy to get a creatine and put your name on it. This is our creatine, and give it a cool name. There's all sorts of existing formulations that you can buy, private label, and add a flavor, and all of a sudden now it's yours, and then the patent's changed. And there's players who do this. Then there's Bioptimizers that doesn't do this. Bioptimizers has their own lab, their own research, and then they use third parties to check their research. Such is the case with Masszymes, which took them 243 experiments to get to the point where they were ready to have people like me use it, and I've been using it now for a couple of years. And they did this test at Berkshire International University. They turned this to a third party, go tell us how this is working. And in a side-by-side comparison, people who ate food and went about their lives had one result. People who ate food and took Masszymes saw another result. That result was specifically this: 1,200% more amino acids in their bodies than the group that did not take Masszymes. That's impressive. Amino acids are the building block of proteins, and proteins are the building block of muscle. Muscle is at the heart of health, even digestive health. So stop getting ripped off. Get more nutrition for every bite of food you eat. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. You get 10% off all their products, including Masszymes, and no longer will poor nutrition be holding you back from reaching your full potential. That's bioptimizers.com/Todd. You get 10% off there. That it's this easy, nearly every election cycle, to go out and produce videos like this should tell us something. Project Veritas once produced video of the son of a Virginia Democrat congressman talking about how they committed vote fraud. These things come up every election cycle. This is an operation run in Minnesota, apparently by Ilhan Omar and financed by a Palestinian terrorist, Bassem Sabri. That comes from Project Veritas making these claims. I take this money for pocket change. Okay, when I fill it out, I'll bring it to you.
Project Veritas has received an explosive piece of tape. The tape you're about to...
Oh, this is, oh gosh, I need to do a better job of sourcing. This is older. Okay, yeah, this is older. This is when O'Keefe was still there.
Shows a man buying a registration form for an absentee ballot from a voter, giving him, quote, pocket money, unquote, of $200 and expecting to collect his ballot when the voter receives it.
This is how you fill it, voter registration form out. Put your first name, last name, address, telephone number. ID number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. After that, you sign it. That's all. Yes, tonight we will close the deal. Money, okay? Yes, yes. Now take this money for your pocket change. Okay, when I fill it out, I'll bring it to you. In another tape, a ballot harvester admits to being paid $800 for his ballot.
That's illegal. Why?
That is illegal? We don't care. How much we were given? $800. What happened here? Was Ilhan Omar investigated for this and her connection to this? That James O'Keefe and Project Veritas was able to produce that, my apologies for thinking this was today, in 2020, is indicative of a system that has not changed. How do we know this? Because we're watching in York County, Pennsylvania, and in First Lancaster County, arrival of ballots, or pardon me, voter registration forms that are probably fraudulent. See, nothing really has changed. You have PBS and National Public Radio. They were some of the organizations that said, in the way of election interference, we're not going to report on the Hunter Biden laptop story because it is obviously an October surprise. These are the same media organizations that are suddenly coming out and giving their own October surprise, such as this, the signs that President Trump is mentally ill. This is from PBS.
Mr. Trump has dismissed any speculation about mental decline, describing his rambling rhetoric as him weaving together different topics and saying his supporters get it. Let's take a look at some of these questions with an author and clinical psychologist who's raised some of them. That's Dr. Ben Michaelis. Doctor, welcome to the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Doctor, both his political opponents, but also some academics look at his speech patterns, they look at his stories and some odd behavior, and they say it's all evidence of mental decline. Do you see it that way? Are those concerns valid?
So, obviously, I can't diagnose someone in absentia, but
Obviously, I can't diagnose someone in absentia, but I'm going to diagnose someone in absentia.
certainly there is ample evidence. And look, I'm 78 years old. Just to be fair, all of us tend to decline over time. Some of what we're seeing is pretty extreme elements of his decline that are certainly suggestive of more serious impairment.
Like riding in a garbage truck. Did you see this? So Biden, in my mind, my opinion, obviously reading a statement, calling Trump supporters garbage. You look at his, so sad. I think overly medicated Parkinson's eyes, dark, black reptilian, and he's clearly reading this statement, clearly scanning side to side, reading it. And that's reported as he called us garbage. So President Trump's team puts him in a garbage truck, and he wears a red or an orange vest throughout his speech, referencing the fact, calling back the fact, keep legs on this story. Biden called you garbage, called supporters of Trump garbage. And media has said it's a sign of his mental decline, that he doesn't understand that's a Michael Dukakis moment. For young people, the Michael Dukakis moment was when that hapless, terrible politician very bad at being a politician, agreed to ride in a tank to make him look tough because he was a pacifist. And he's riding in a tank with what looked like a hairnet and a big smile on his face, goofy looking grin. No one bought it. People do buy President Trump in a garbage truck because he likes this stuff. But they're calling that a sign of mental decline. So is his agreement to go work at McDonald's, which dominated the news cycle for 2 weeks. In a positive way for Trump, it forced Kamala Harris into another unforced error of her team apparently photoshopping her face on the body of a white girl who was then became a woman through age and apparently died of cancer. But hey, why not steal her body and slap Kamala's face on this? And for her supporters, even her staff to do that, if it's staff or supporters, shows this desperation. Now, none of this stuff is going to convince people who can still be convinced. And a friend of mine the other day said he's very conservative. He follows the Lord Jesus. He tries so hard to abide, and sometimes abiding is hard. And he told me, man, I'm really struggling to fill out my ballot for Trump. He said, there's no chance I'll vote for Kamala, but I really feel like I want to write in. And instead of saying, I hate you, I said that stinking therapeutic phrase, help me understand. Help me understand that. And so he tried. I can't say that I fully understood, but it gave me an opportunity to speak into this in a caring and fairness lens. Now, my friend is analytical. He's smart. He doesn't give himself enough credit. He's a super brilliant man. And he tries, I don't even know if he's trying or if it's just instinctive or if he truly doesn't believe he's brilliant. He's a brilliant guy. God has gifted him intellectually. Maybe it's because he works in the trades. I don't know. But when I heard that, I was able to say something through a caring and fairness lens. And this is really, really important as we get ready to go into this J.D. Vance portion of the program. People who are undecided at this point are very often viewing things through a caring and fairness lens. In this case, my friend's looking at this from a fairness of the Christian faith. Is this guy really carrying the torch for the Lord Jesus? Is President Trump really a godly man? Does he really serve the Lord? Or is he using the Lord as a marketing slogan? And we're going to do a whole segment on this in the 3 Stories segment of the Todd Herman Show coming up later, because there's really good news about that question. That'll be coming up later. Caring and fairness works like this. It was really simple. Hey, man, I get it. I know that you're really seeking to follow the Lord in everything you do. And let me ask you this question. Would it be fair for you to empower the votes of people who are voting to mutilate kids? They don't know it, but they are. Or who are voting for more porn? Have you seen this ad that the Kamala Harris team put out? There's a guy watching porn and, well, I'll just say it, masturbating. And then a Republican breaks in. You can't do that. Party that's saying, oh, we'll protect your porn. You should do more of that. Is it really fair for you to withhold your vote and therefore to empower the vote of people who back that or back putting into law that it's okay to steal as long as it's below $1,000? Is that really fair? And I mean, does this show caring for the country? And it seemed to work. My friend leaned into that. You're right. I guess it's another case where I just plug my nose and I vote. Okay. For Trump, right? Yes, yes. Okay, I don't hate you anymore. That lens can be applied to so many things. Independents and liberals, and forget the liberals, they're bought in at this point, but independents view everything through the lens of those 2 emotions, caring and fairness. They respond first emotionally. They might do some research after that, but only research that will show them that, yeah, I'm the caring and I'm the fair one, and this is a caring and fair policy. So as we go through the J.D. Vance videos, as J.D. Vance uses this method to really, really go at the Mockingbird media, We'll go through it from a caring and fairness lens in hopes that you can use this construct over the weekend to convince anybody who's not yet convinced. Sometimes I got to be honest well, I always want to be honest with you, sometimes to a fault, right? Sometimes we get uncomfortable here. Is that right? Truly, don't you sometimes say, dude, like hold some stuff back? I think people probably do that. I wish I could, this is a horrible, I wish you could feel what I felt when I had my second shoulder surgery. And I went down like 7, maybe 10 days after that surgery. And it was so bad. I took my friend Ben with me. Gosh, he's a patient and loving man. So patient and loving. And I took him with me, and he carried my bags. It was that bad. I mean, Todd let me do that. At one point, I was trying to stow my bag up top, like with my left hand and my left leg. And Ben's like, Todd, I go, no, I'm fine. He goes, you're not fine. You're not fine. He didn't yell at me. He doesn't do that. He's a very patient man. You're not fine. Please let me do that. That's one of the reasons I'm here. Okay, so he picked my bag up. I wish you could feel what I felt the day after I got the 42 million stem cells in my shoulder that come from umbilical cords and placentas only, never anything to do with abortion. The strain of cells I've used twice there has never been exposed to the modified RNA injections. I wish you could feel the absolutely exquisite confusion I had in the morning. I woke up. I wasn't wearing that stupid brace. And I talked to you about that one time with rotator cuff surgery. Don't wear the brace as long as they say they do, as long as you have good proprioception. And I woke up and I started to use my arm to prop myself up. And I went, wait, hold on. Which arm did I have surgery on? And I had to sit there and think about this because I'd had my left shoulder done earlier, like a year before that, year and a half. And I couldn't remember. I had to really think about it. Oh, that's right. It's my right. The pain was gone 7, maybe 10 days after surgery. I think it was 10, gone, because the stem cells had gone in and destroyed the inflammation. Then they went about rebuilding shoulder tissue, muscle, and tendon to such a degree that within, it was about 11 weeks versus 48 weeks, I regained my pull-ups and my push-ups. Think of that, 11 weeks versus 48 weeks. You might be being told that you have to have surgery. That might not be true. That only medicine's going to help. That might not be true. You might be able to avoid surgery. I know you can recover from surgery faster through Renew Healthcare. Go to renue.healthcare. Please tell them you're part of the Todd Herman Show family. Please greet them that way and elevate your quality of life by elevating yourself to actual healthcare. Renew.healthcare. So JD Vance challenged Jake Tappers on the integrity of their coverage. And let's do this through a caring and fairness lens. This is very well done. Let's add caring and fairness to this.
Now, Jake, we also have to remember, step back a little bit. Well, ask yourself a basic question about network integrity. You guys talked about the Russia hoax nonstop.
The FBI was investigating it. The FBI was investigating it, and we recovered them.
And so you took the words of unnamed FBI agents and put them on your network as if they were the gospel truth. You did it again and again. A viewer of your network would have believed that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin conspired in 2016.
No.
That was totally and preposterously false.
No.
Well, that's
what you just said is
right.
false. We covered an FBI investigation. I don't know why you want to talk about the FBI investigation.
You covered it in a way that gave credence to anonymous sources' accusations. You did it yourself. Your network did it, Jake. But again, can we talk about the issues that Americans care about?
Well done. Jake, I wish you cared more for your audience. It was really unfair. I hear you saying that you covered this. You're covering an FBI investigation. But Jake, it wasn't done fairly. And let me give you an example. Was it fair that after President Trump was exonerated, you didn't spend 12 weeks talking about the exoneration or this? Was it really fair that you continued to have on your network the intelligence officials who, well, let's be honest, they lied? That you continue to have them on? And did it show caring for your audience that you really never investigated, hey, how'd that all get started? Why did they do this to the country? Do you think it's fair to the country that there are people who still believe that President Trump has all these things? I mean, I would hope you'd care more for the country so as to be fair on this coverage. Here's another caring and fairness lens. And this is for people who are undecided. Is it fair that Kamala Harris worked with Nancy Pelosi to force Joe Biden out of office? Do you think she ever really cared for him? I mean, Joe Biden's admitted he was forced out. Nancy Pelosi has as well. Do you think she really cared for Joe? And is it fair that she didn't earn a single vote as the Democrat nominee? Do you think she'll be fair to you? Do you think she truly cares for you? Given that she was willing to do this to the man who made her vice president? Do you think she's motivated by caring and fairness? See, that construct works because it causes the people who vote based upon caring and fairness to step back and go, wait a minute. I don't want to be the person who's not caring and fair. I don't want to align myself with people who aren't caring and fair, and it can cause them to pause. You can then begin to make some statements about the caring and fairness of President Trump's policies. I just think it's more fair that President Trump wants to make sure that we give our veterans the focus they need versus sending all the money to illegal immigrants. I just feel it's more fair. I mean, we really owe those people a lot of caring. That lens works. This is Jake Tapper, and he's talking here with Christian Welker.
Are running to be vice president of the United States. And there is a 50-50 chance, maybe better, I don't know, that you're going to succeed. Are you running to be vice president of the United States, or are you running to be vice president of the red states? Because if you win, and there's a decent chance you will, you're going to be vice president of childless cat ladies. You're going to be vice president of legal Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. You're going to be their vice president too.
Hey, I just noticed that's not Christian Welker. That's actually Jake Tapper.
Are you running to do that?
Jake, of course, I'm running to be the vice president of all Americans. I'm running because I want people to be able to afford a good life in this country. You know how I grew up. You know that I grew up in a family where things were often tough. I want, whether you're in a blue state or a red state, whether you're going to vote for Trump or you're going to vote for Harris, I want you to be able to have a good life in this country. But what's not going to happen with the broken leadership in Washington, D.C. Let me give you a statistic, Jake, because here is what the leadership of people like Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi, and yes, Mike Pence, over 30 years in this country has led to. A person with a bachelor's degree lives 7 years longer than a person without a bachelor's degree. There are a lot of people who have gotten rich and powerful off of American decline. Some of them have had R's next to their name. Some of them have had D's next to their name. And the first person who I believe is really putting the interests of the American people first is Donald J. Trump.
Jake, is it fair? See, J.D. Vance is so good. If he had said this, Jake, do you think it's fair that people with bachelor's degrees live 7 years longer than people who don't have them? And what kind of caring does it show in a system where people in Washington, D.C. and around Washington, D.C. unfairly enrich themselves on the decline of our country? Say, getting rich off of servicing our deficit spending. That's, for an example, making money off of the debt American people are forced to incur. Is that fair, Jake? Because we don't think it is. And we really care about the fairness of this country because we love this country. So with your friends, do you think it's fair that people who never got college degrees but have fought hard and worked hard and come to succeed in life, do you think it's fair that they're being told they have to pay for the college educations of people who have master's degrees? I mean, does that show that you care about them? Because this is what these policies are doing. Is it fair that the government and Kamala Harris calls the shifting of costs from the backs of one person to another loan forgiveness, when they're saying it's college debt forgiveness, when in fact the debts aren't being forgiven, they're just being put on the backs of other people? Does that show caring and fairness? Is it fair, Jake? So when you use that construct, what you're doing is you're digging into the desire of people who make decisions based upon these emotions. You are causing them to question, am I actually on team caring and fairness? Because they do not want to be on the team that's not caring and fair because it hurts them. And I'm saying it mentally hurts them. This is a caring and fair thing that we do on the program. When we first started this show, we made a decision with our radio syndicator, Radio America, who syndicates our weekend show. We made an agreement with Major Creative Marketing, who does a good portion of the ad sales. They're in Seattle. Dear friend Jerry runs that. That we would take certain parts of our program and dedicate them to companies that could not afford ads here. So one of them is Allen Soaps. And here's what's happened as you have, in a caring and fair sense, looked at the soap side by side. Big company soap, probably made in China, probably with slave labor, almost definitely not all natural ingredients, with companies that don't particularly care about you or America. They're not caring or fair in that regard. They just want our money. On the other side, you have Allen Soap, all natural, made in America by a family that cares so much about soap. They've done this for 3 generations. They cared so much about the cause of Allen's that they agreed to do it for John, who's Allen's dad. Allen, you could say it was unfair, but I don't think he believes that. That he's so high up on the autism spectrum that he's effectively nonverbal and so challenged physically that he's been through 18 operations, though he's only 13. I don't think he views it as unfair. He can't speak, but he's a brilliant kid. Really, I mean, he can speak a little bit, but not much. That began as a mission to employ Allen, but now Ian works there. And now another young woman works there. And it was the caring idea to make sure that people who suffer in that way, or are challenged in that way, I should say, have a place to go to work to experience the dignity of work. So make a caring and fair choice. Continue to buy from the big companies that don't particularly care about your values, or go to allensoaps.com/Todd and get 10% off all their products there. It's allensoaps.com/Todd. Back to the JD Vance method and caring and fairness. This is Christian Welker. This time really is Christian Welker lying about the Russia investigation as JD Vance is there.
When you say that he's an adversary, just to get back to the question, you're not willing to go so far as to call him an enemy.
Well, we're not in a war with him, and I don't want to be in a war with Vladimir Putin's Russia. I think that we should try to pursue avenues of peace. I'd also call China certainly a competitor, but we're not in a war with China either. I do think, though, that China constitutes the biggest threat that we have for the United States of America, and I think that we have to be serious about it. But I think we have to be careful about the language that we use in international diplomacy. We can recognize, obviously, that we have adversarial interests with Russia. We can condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and I have, and of course the president has, but we also need to engage in some smart diplomacy if we're ever going to get out of the mess that Kamala Harris has left us in and get back to a posture of peace.
Of course, Donald Trump was president for 4 years while Russia was essentially invading Crimea. Why didn't he kick him out when he had the chance? He had 4 years.
Oh, I think that's a misunderstanding of the history, Chris. I look at that much differently. First of all,
going on.
We had Russia invade another country, a sovereign nation, during Obama. We had Russia invade a sovereign nation during Bush's term. We had Russia invade a sovereign nation during the leadership of Kamala Harris. The one 4-year term where Russia did not launch a full-scale invasion against a neighbor was under the leadership of Donald Trump. We also have to remember, just on that point, if Donald Trump had not given Ukraine javelins, the country would not exist as an independent sovereign nation anymore. So the idea that Donald Trump wasn't sufficiently strong on Russia, I think, is belied by the actual history of the.
And let me ask you this, Christian, is it fair to have this conversation without discussing the known fact, that under Barack Obama, a woman named Victoria Nuland, who now calls herself Toria Nuland, engineered a coup in Ukraine? Is it fair to have this discussion and not mention the fact that we have audio recordings of Victoria Nuland plotting to decide who they would place as figurehead over the country of Ukraine, knowing that doing so would lead to Vladimir Putin eventually invading the nation? Is that fair for us to have this discussion this way? Because I think, look, I care about the fact that we might one day see Kamala Harris decide to commit American troops to a ground war with Russia. And I care about that because I fought. I didn't, but being JD Vance here, I fought. And I don't necessarily want our troops, people with whom I've served, going and doing a land war in Russia. Is that fair to have this discussion without recognizing that Kamala Harris and her party helped precipitate this? Even Joe Biden warned about it. And I just continue this discussion and just say, is it really honestly fair that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are funding both sides of the war between Israel and Hamas? Does that show any fairness or any caring at all for our country? See, that lens is potent because it causes people who make decisions emotionally to go, wow, you are kind of hitting on the two emotions that matter to me. And if we do this over the weekend, I think we can have a great way of persuading people. This is more with JD Vance and Christian Welker.
Former Vice President Mike Pence said, quote, President Trump asked me to put him over my oath to the Constitution. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. Will your loyalty, Senator, be to the Constitution or to Donald Trump?
Well, of course, my loyalty is to the American people and to the United States Constitution, but I think the best way to accomplish that loyalty, Kristen, is to get back to a president who delivered the fastest rising take-home pay in a generation, 1.5% inflation, and a secure southern border. I don't think there's inconsistency between loyalty to the Constitution and support for Donald Trump. That's why I'm out there trying to persuade my fellow Americans that Donald Trump's presidency worked for them, and I'd like us to get back to those smart
Just
policies.
to put a very fine point on this, Mike Pence says Trump asked him to put Trump over the Constitution. If you find yourself in a similar position one day, will your loyalty be to the Constitution or to Donald J. Trump?
I just said my loyalty, Kristen, is to the Constitution of the United States. But have we talked at all about the unaffordable costs of groceries? Have we talked about the fact that because I brought it up, but young Americans can't afford a home? You didn't bring that up. I brought that up. It's so interesting, Kristen, because I think that Kamala Harris's campaign, and unfortunately, too many of her media allies are more interested in what Donald Trump has said than what Donald Trump did in office.
And Kristen, by the way, while we're on this topic, do you think it's fair that you asked me this question and I've answered it, Kristen, and you're not asking Kamala Harris to stop abusing the Constitution? It's evident. Kristen, your network and others conspired with her to hide the Hunter Biden laptop story. That wasn't fair to the American people. And you have conspired to actually encourage more censorship. That actually violates our Constitution, Chris. That they actually did that in violation of our Constitution. Right now, Joe Biden is defying the Supreme Court, which is a constitutionally provisioned body of government, who's told him you don't get to pretend to forgive student loan debt. He's still doing it. Is it fair that you ask me these questions and never Kamala Harris? I would think you'd care about your audience more than that. Anything can be done in a caring and fairness lens. And when you do it this way, you actually deliver the ability to take people who can be persuaded and to persuade them. We can do it with Margaret Brennan. She tries to get J.D. Vance on defense on the Constitution again.
You took a vow first as a Marine and then as a United States Senator to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Can you assure the American people that you will do everything you can to stand by that and to make sure that President Trump abides by the Constitution?
Of course, but I don't worry about Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump believes in the Constitution. It's why he's running for president a third time, is because he's worried that Kamala Harris has broken the greatest economy in the world, and Donald Trump
about suspending it, the January 6th events. I don't have to retread the territory you well know about challenging the certification of the
I think that Donald Trump believes in the American Constitution. I know he does. I've seen it in his actions. I've talked to him about it. But you asked about me, and personally, yes, my first loyalty is to the American people and to the United States Constitution. I think the best way to serve loyally to those people and to that Constitution is to get us back in a place where Americans can afford to live a decent life.
So it does a great job, acknowledge, bridge, and then go into what he wants to say. And he could have done one better thing. You know, Margaret, I have to question if it's fair that you are challenging me and the president on questioning the certification of the election when right now there are Democrats in Congress today who have said they will not certify the election if President Trump wins. And incidentally, I don't know that your networks reported this, and I don't think it's fair to the American people that you haven't. Did you know that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have issued a DOD executive order allowing the Army, the United States Army military, to fire upon American citizens? First time that's ever been done. I think it's not very fair that you're not disclosing that. And on the topic of fairness and coverage, you know, and the American people know this, and I think that there are people who care enough to look into this. You could simply go watch an 11-minute video of Democrats denying election results. So I don't know that you care enough about your audience to play that. But it's an unfair thing you're doing here, particularly to your audience. I mean, I'm a politician, and look, it's fair game to hit me with this, but it's really unfair to your audience that you have robbed them of that information. One thing people hate is being robbed. And last one, Margaret Brennan tried to pin J.D. Vance down on his polling with women.
I want to ask you about polling and where we are in this campaign.
Sure.
Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney called you and Donald Trump misogynistic pigs. She urged voters to look at what you have said in the past. And she said of you personally, quote, "You've got a real women problem." Do you think your ticket has a women problem?
No, I don't think that we do, but we have to make our best case to women and to men as well as we can. And of course, women and men are going to decide where the chips ultimately fall. I think it's a more interesting reflection of Kamala Harris's campaign that at this late stage, she's not talking about how she can lower the price of groceries because she raised the price of groceries. She's not talking about how she can lower the price of housing because her policy saw a 40% increase in the cost of housing. She's going to Michigan with Liz Cheney, the person whose father is responsible for the deaths of millions of innocent Arabs and tens of thousands of innocent American troops, and saying effectively that if you elect me, I'm going to have the foreign policy of Dick and Liz Cheney. I don't think that message is going to fly in Michigan. I don't think it flies in Pennsylvania either.
And you know what, Margaret, on the topic of fairness, and forgive me for installing some humor here. I find it really fascinating that you're asking me about my respect for women and this campaign's respect for women, when in fact, Kamala Harris decided to put on the Supreme Court a woman who cannot define women. Is that fair to women? God always chooses the simple things to shame the wise, the weak things to shame the powerful. It's one of the things he's done throughout history. And God also tells us this in Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Caring and fairness. And God kind of invented those things. Caring and fairness. This is the Todd Herman Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind, and please make every effort to walk in the light of Christ.